Just so you know, you're recording right now.
Thank you. That's what I'm wondering about too. She's left his maps here.
Is he looking for maps now?
He wants his maps. They were his.
And you sure you got those maps here?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Weston. How are you? Oh, did you send it just now or last week? Oh, I'm gonna leave it now. Weston just sent me the advertisement for you. So I'll break it out. I'll send it to the Chronicle.
Calling Casey with Caboose, that's not
Do I need to call her? It's too soon.
Thursday or Friday.
That's a real treat, right?
We have that. We have that map.
My old maps, but I don't have any new ones. This is what it says here.
And you kind of go through little cameras and stuff together. Thursday night, we like to never got out of the house, right?
I think you're new to this, right?
This is one
You're
of
new to
the first maps that came out, so I've seen a lot of them.
Yeah, because you're going to Ordola.
Tomorrow, or
Wednesday.
probably tomorrow, but that's still gonna give us 24 hours decision for 2 days notification. She sent it by
We also,
Friday, 2/16.
because you also need to go out to get 2 non-staff members. One is with his
Yes. 24 hours.
It was everything was pretty here.
If you can maybe push it to next week. Until
Next week I'm on vacation.
well, so maybe pushing for Friday. Pushing for because I could always push the Tyler thing to another day. They're gonna.
It's like Thanksgiving dinner, isn't it? When you were a kid.
Everybody ready? I guess we can start having our discussion. Basically, I think what we're here for today is to discuss the units and how they're breaking and where the hospital's at right now. So if you want to start off and giving us a summation of what you guys are doing or how we're moving forward.
Sure. They can put together a little, and I'll pass some, I think I've got enough copies for everybody here. I'll pass this document around. it's sort of just to educate everybody here, and it was helpful to me to better understand kind of the long history of our hospital campus. And so I was just going to sort of run through that so everybody knows all the background and all the players back to 1889. I think everybody's aware that there was a hospital built here in 1889 by the Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati, Ohio. And then that organization operated for several decades. And then in 1969, the hospital was donated by the Sisters of Charity, that original campus, to Trinidad Area Health Association, designated as 501c3. Actually, it wasn't donated to us, it was sold to us, but it was only for $1, so I didn't want to.
$10, wasn't it? I think
We found
Harlan, didn't we find that? It's $10?
It was, one of them was $10 and one was one. One was the hospital, one was Ave Maria.
Oh.
Yeah, so a nominal amount for sure, whatever it is. And then in 71, the hospital pursued Hilberg and grant funds from the federal government. That was that program that built all these small rural hospitals all over the country. Used the county as a conduit. So there was $2 million of Hilberg funds and then a $1 million revenue bond by TAHA to build the new hospital. The new hospital was completed 1975. The health department was built. All the hospital parking lot was already in place when the health department was built. 1990, finished paying off the revenue bond, and I don't know if it was a component of those bonds, but the hospital was deeded back to the county in 1990 when that occurred, and so TAHA entered into a 24-year lease with the county. That was later extended to 99 years, and so we operate under that now. We have 80 or 85 years left on that. In 2000, Dr. Jimenez and some of his partners built the clinic building. In 2015, we bought out Dr. Jimenez's interest in that. In 2018, we bought the Fabric building, and now in 2018, we're talking about the property transfer to secure our USDA loan for the hospital improvement project. A couple of items of note. Sisters of Charity, again, originally donated the land to TAHA with the intention of building a new hospital. The county acted as a conduit, but otherwise didn't contribute any funds. Health department was built after that, a couple years after that. We have an agreement with the health department that allows them primary access to the parking lot. We actually sort of treat it like their parking lot, and we let them have the preferential spaces. Our employees park in the back of that parking lot, so we try to be a good neighbor there. We have a similar agreement with COG. On the next page, the city has agreed to accept the road and its upkeep. We had thought that might be the one component of the community plan. What do we call that? Plan community. But it sounds like that's probably taken off the table. And then I may turn it over to David and Lou for the rest of this. The shrine will be unaffected. We don't have any interest in any of that property south of the main road.
South of the Shrine Road. So the way the shrine is located, essentially everything to the south of the shrine is all mountain, vertical practically. So we were just calling to just cut it off essentially at that road, the driveway. And so then everything from the driveway up into the plat, we would just let the county retain him.
Right. So north of that, we might want to do some parking at some point, so we'd like to hang on to that.
So when Terry Surveying did this updated survey, what they discovered was that the shrine plat does not actually encompass the shrine, according to the landmarks. And so whether or not the county wants to go through the effort of having them resurvey it and get the shrine folks to sign off on it and so forth, we just said, we just cut it off, we just go north, we don't have to deal with it. It's not buildable land anyways. And then, but the land that's below it, that's between the red road and the shrine itself, there is buildable land there that can be used potentially for either a small building or a parking lot in the future. That's what we would do. And then the rest of the plan community is all about just giving utility easements. For the most part. And then, of course, the parking and storage programs.
So it doesn't seem to us that our proposal is any different than the intent of the use of that property for the last 120 years. But I think y'all might have some questions or concerns about the direction we're moving.
I think some of the concerns were, Kim Gonzalez, if you have some issues that you have, would you like to disclose those?
Sure. So, in going through the declaration, my first concern was that it would just be our building, and that's all that's deeded out to the county commissioners, whereas in 74, 75, when the facility was built, and doing a lot of digging and talking to people that were there during that time, our building encompasses the parking lot. And then in 2000, we went to the county commissioners because of bioterrorism, and that's when we encompassed the lower lot with all of our APR supplies. So that's one of my concerns, is losing that. The other is basically that we stay under the deed with the county commissioners, since we are required by Colorado revised statute that we remain under county commissioners by law. By law, we have to be in the county under a county commissioner. So, and then next was we had an issue with possibly if we ever wanted to change any signage, add signage out in front of our building, different landscaping. We don't want to be able to have to go to a board and ask to make changes to our own building because that's been our building since 74, and they were moved in 76. And then making sure that our back door that has the patio access, that's an emergency exit for the health department as well. So we also have to, if that patio ever did move or change, or I don't see it ever doing that, but we have to remain access out the back door. In the declaration, it said something about having access to units after hours, and according to law, we cannot allow that with public health because of what we house within our facilities. And then just the board of directors voting and the number of votes was an issue, and it really was like it was one-sided with the number of units the hospital has according to what COG has and what the health department has. It doesn't seem like it's a fair vote on that end. As well as...
but don't you think everybody's getting a vote based on their pieces of the property?
But
so
I think
COG has theirs, the Shrine has theirs, you have yours, and we have the hospital.
I think... No, I don't think it's a fair vote because you have more votes, more units on one side versus two government entities on each side. Like the hospital has, what, 4 units, and then we have 1 and 1.
And I believe you get 1 vote per unit is the way
It was described in
the
that.
way we interpreted the declaration. So if TAHA ends up with 4 units and the county 1 and COG 1, TAHA will outvote any of the members.
And then a major concern was making sure that our health department facility and lands are not being used against any loans or contracts with the hospital. Going forward, we need to apply for our own loans and contracts to update our facility. Our windows whistle, our doors blow open, our AC units about ready to go out. We've been able to repair that off and on. So our building has issues too that we have to go forward with, whether we have to apply for USDA or some type of upgrade grants there. And then I think lastly, my other concern was the health department paying fees to a community campus because we are all funded under grants and contracts, and that's not built in our annual budgets. So those fees initially I think would have to come out of the county commissioners since it's their building and we rent from them.
And that's going to be hard to pass to the voters of us paying for our own building. So that might not be feasible.
And so what fees are in the document that they
Well, maybe we need to back up a little bit, and I'm the reader, I don't think I know who all we told are, so that might be helpful to me as something on hand. But what we, and this was the first draft that we sent out, and what we were doing was we were basing this off of the current leased property. So when we drew the unit around the health department building, that's exactly what's accepted out of the lease. So TAHA actually has the lease on all the rest of that property. And we were cutting off more of the property that we thought either the county wanted to keep or COGS wanted to keep. And we just sort of took a draft of that. It was intended to be something that wasn't dictated. It was to be able to talk through and see how it would work. But when we talked about those areas, right now that TAHA controls all of this property under its lease, the 99-year lease, and with the exception of very minimal consent that it needs from the county, it possesses it and has to take care of all of it, really. And then there were some things that were sort of the bump up when we ended up we were going to try to get this financing done at the end of last year, right? So we were trying to move pretty quickly because the property had been staged for construction, assembled, mobilized, and then we had government shutdown, and then we had some issues with asbestos. So things have slowed down. It gives us a chance to come in and the city then stepped up and said, and by the way, who are the city attorneys? Are the city attorneys here?
No.
Were they going to be here?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, so then they called and said, we want to catch up your zoning because we were well aware that some of this was still under this old zoning, which I think was laid over this property after the hospital was there, but they put the zoning on as residential single-family lots. So it's a non-conforming use on this long-term ground lease with some title problems. And I mean, it's sort of a law school exam about how do you figure out how to put this together in a way that's financeable with USDA money, where the USDA restrictions are pretty ominous. You know, they have to have title, they have to have insurable title, they have to have all these things that this property didn't present in its current lease format. So we said, well, the best way to do that right now, because you can either completely replat the property, you can fix all the transfers, you can do this one big lot, but we can't have any religious property on a government loan security. So we had to make sure that we took out all of the shrine property. The shrine property didn't match up particularly with the way that it was accepted out of the ground lease once they actually platted it with the surveyors. So we had a lot of things to fix. So when we put this planned community together, we took a shot at saying, okay, there are some areas that we don't need that are currently under TAHA's control. We don't need the shrine property, so let's figure out the right place to cut that off so that they have access. They have the shrine property, and we know we don't need the property around that. So let the county keep that. We don't need that as a part of the TAHA ground lease. Then we looked at this COGS building where the parking lot is down below, and though they have some rights of use of some parking, none of that was defined. So there's been some operational stuff that's happened while the realities of the documents had not caught up. So we said, well, we don't need any of the property of the one COGS building or frankly the parking lot, which is in the leased property. It's not part of the COGS property. So we can clean a lot of that up. We can clean so much of the title problems and other operational issues up with a planned community without having to go back to the city and say, your platting is a mess and this really isn't residential lots. What's that? Oh, well, it just hadn't caught up, like I said. And in fact, when I talked to some people at this city, they said, oh yeah, we've got homes in town that are straddling lots that are public and private. And I said, okay, well, granted, we all have that, right? And especially dealing with some of the rural areas, which is what we love to do with these rural hospitals and senior care centers and stuff that I work on. You just have to figure out how you get this done, because the real goal, I think, is to bring your hospital up to date, get this expansion done in a way that allows all of these buildings to work together. So when we put this map together, we were springing off of that. And again, not necessarily knowing what position the county would want. Did the county want COGs to have what we identified in this map as the COG Unit 2? Or did they want COGs to have it? We don't have, a dog in that race at all. So we want to make sure that whatever you guys want to do, we will redraft it to accommodate it. With respect to the health department building, what we understand is that area, currently the only things that's accepted out of the lease is the building itself. So that, again, when we started drilling down and we came out and talked about this originally, it was a question about, well, who actually takes care of that parking? And who is going to, in this big renovation and upgrade of this campus, who's going to resurface the parking lot and restripe it and take care of moving some of the utilities, because the utility company wants to move all of the utilities in one area, which is going to be kind of where the transformer for the health department is currently located. But when the health department gets renovated, they want those utilities moved. So we know there's going to be some actual practical movement of some of those things. So what we thought would, and again, the COGS building, while their parking lot is down below, they use some of the parking above. And then they've got the funky old tunnel, which goes under the road, that's actually only connected to the COGS building. It's the tunnel to nowhere, and there's actually some piece of equipment that sits down there. And my first query was, gosh, is it stable? It's been there forever. So what do you do with it? It would cost a lot of money to fill it in, to take care of it. If it's when you've got limited amount of money in these projects, you use it where it's necessary, and otherwise you draft around it. And so what we decided is we would just leave it there. It's still connected to that building, nothing else. But we would leave it there. If it does have an impact at some point, that actually is owned by COGS or the county or whoever wants to end up with this property, but not by TAHA. So they don't want to be saddled with a problem that they can't afford to fix. And it doesn't need to be fixed. Nobody has said it needs to be whatever. The other thing that we saw was this road, which all the title work was never dedicated to the city. Even though they were plowing it, they didn't own it. And what we didn't want to do was open a can of worms and say, well, let's go to the city and see if they'll take it. And in my experience, at least in some areas, certainly in the Denver metro, you say we want to dedicate this, and they say, fine, you got to put utilities in it, you got to do curb and gutter, you got to make it this wide instead of that wide, and all of a sudden you're busting your budget again in a project that has a combined number of dollars. So again, we tried to solve that problem by making this the common roadway, and what we did is we have these units so that most of the cost of all of this would be on TAHA, because we didn't want to burden the health department or COGS, because what we said is, and now if we were going to pay for it, we also would get the votes in order to figure out the budget and everything else, thinking that TAHA would be basically responsible for this whole campus, which they kind of are now. And in kind of vetting and drilling down to the details of the parking for the health department, he drew out this little area where they currently have priority parking, and we wanted to maintain and protect that. We wanted to maintain and protect the area where they've got the satellite dishes and some storage as primary, but we did it as a primary easement instead of a part of the ownership of the unit, because then TAHA would care for the entire care and feeding of those areas. And so what we thought was it would be best for the health department to be able to have a right of use, but not have to pay for the resurfacing and the restriping. My understanding was that they had a budget that they used to actually pay for snow removal, and that would be turned over and TAHA would take over that responsibility. So we were trying to actually lighten the burden on the health department and lighten their budgetary constraints, because we understood loud and clear that they don't have an open book. They're not making a lot of money. So, but they have this important function. So we were trying to take that off their plate, put it on our plate, and have that as basically a priority use without spending we kind of noodle a little bit calculation of probably, 100 to 150,000 to deconstruct and reconstruct that area, the parking in that area, which is the grade differential between the parking and the lower level. And so that's where we started. Now, since then, the city came to us and they said, we want to rezone this. And we said, great, it needs to be rezoned. Will you work with us? Will you take it as is? Because these are county serving facilities, every piece of it. So they don't have a ton of money. We're trying to get this renovation done. We're trying to borrow funds to do that. They said, we will waive your application fees to do a rezoning and a replatting, which is needed desperately to clean up this property. And we'll take the road as is. All great solutions, and it should be. It's the city responding to the needs of the community and the surrounding areas to get a better hospital for the community. So we thought that was a really good start down that road, and we still understand that they're willing to work with the county and TAHA to accomplish this in a way that allows for further development of the campus with uses consistent with the campus. Right now, when you go to any financing source, you've got to get clean title, insurable title, you've got to get all these things done, and frankly, this is a non-conforming permitted use. So it's non-conforming, and the questions with that is, if it burned down, could you rebuild it in the same way? Anytime you have a non-conforming use, that becomes an issue. Now, it hasn't been an issue to date, because I don't think anybody has taken this financing to a level where it's going to be financed with federal dollars. That you get different eyes on it and different requirements and all these endorsements, and that's why we were looking over this saying, we're going to have to fix some things. So the fact that the city is willing to come in and rezone it will fix that problem. So we ought to all do that, and we were willing to do the heavy lifting on the legal side to help replat and to work with the city and the county and do that work together with Pam and the other attorneys who would be working for the county and the city, whomever, to get this up to speed so that it would be a better, add value for the future. And also get rid of that non-conforming use problem and the fact that it's zoned residential lots instead of a hospital. So that's a little bit why we started where we did. And having said that, I think that I understood the purpose here was to figure out what really is going to work and where do we want to end up and how quickly. The how quickly part related originally to whether we were going to be able to get the government funds, because they only closed so many of these rural hospitals and senior care facilities into their programs. So we wanted to make sure we could best as getting the Trinidad Hospital campus into that realm. There are other financing options, some of which would say, let's just keep it the lease. They'll take the lease, we'll fix the zoning with the city, which I assume the county would want. But we'll just keep it a leasehold, and we don't necessarily need to go this direction. It still seems to me to keep the best options open for the lowest interest rate and for the longest term for the hospital debt that USDA, and this is totally David Jones' bailiwick, they need to make that decision about what works best for their finance pro forma. But it still seemed to me that this option allowed everybody to clean up for the benefit of the city, for the county, and for TAHA.
When you were putting this plan together, did you talk to the county?
Yeah, I
talked to their inputs.
Yeah, I've talked to
Did you talk
them.
to-
Yeah, we went over these, and when I came down for the first county meeting, we were at the very initial stage about talking about it again with the goal. I don't even know
The
when that
health
was.
department, did you talk to them?
Yeah, we sat down after that meeting and talked about the map. We pulled
But
out the
since
map.
then, have you had dialogue regarding moving forward, and how the health department is concerned?
So the only meeting I had was when we were out here after
Yeah.
the commissioners. That wasn't a meeting. You said there was going forward before this was drafted.
That's not how I recall it, but what we did is, here's how we envision it going together, and then we threw a draft out.
So is this a draft?
It's just a draft.
Yeah.
And we didn't say this is written in stone or anything. I mean, we said, get us your comments, and we got some comments for the USDA, and then we had the shutdown, and we didn't get comments back for a long time. When we got the comments and we realized there were these, well, do we just leave it a lease, in which case we have all this property under our lease right now, or do we figure out other solutions? But nothing was ever intended to be an affront to anybody.
Yeah,
Because we
just the
still,
opposite, actually.
we consider this to be something that benefits everybody. So if they're starting to be this sort of give and take and everything, they can just say, we'll just live under our lease. And we don't want the area that's, and frankly, if they didn't take the government funds, they would pay for a higher interest rate.
Actually, the rates are the same now, just the term.
Yeah, so we have other options to go. I will tell you that, having dug into this myself, I mean, this is, the title is not it's not good. It's not in good shape. It's been sort of band-aided together. There are so many deeds in and deeds out. They go back years and years and years and years and years. So, to me, it needs to be fixed in some way. And that's
So when
for everyone's benefit.
when we talked with yourself and previous conversations that we've had over the years, we understood that, we go back 4 years ago when we originally applied for our DOLA grant, and we talked about paving, and we were going to redo all the parking lots. That was part of our original DOLA grant application. And down below, we were going to level and pave the whole area down below. And the county commissioner said, that's fine, we don't have a problem with that as long as there's still dedicated space for storage and so forth. We said, absolutely, we don't have an issue with that. We just want to pave it all. We want to put up the retaining wall and pave the whole thing, so then there's additional parking on campus. And then your storage sheds and mobile, the trailers and so forth, will be on pavement instead of on dirt. So when we were drafting this, that's why we said, currently, you have this parking area that's dedicated to your priority use. I said, absolutely, we have no issue with that whatsoever. Or
That was
the parking.
about 2 years ago, I think, we had that discussion.
So the original one was in
That was before I was
15.
here, okay.
Yeah, that was our original application. So, but on this one, trying to do this. So we talked about basically what's in the green as being in the preferential. So right now, we don't park here. Our folks don't park here, and we don't store anything in this lower part.
So, yeah, that's the part I remember when we discussed paving that, right?
Yeah, we were gonna pave this whole, we were gonna pave all the way across and as much as we could to make the parking lot big, because as you can see, we have employees parking here, we have them parking alongside the building, we they're parking over here on this side. We have problems with trucks trying to come in for delivery, right? So fixing that was gonna solve a lot of issues for us. As we got into it, we discovered we did our master facility plan, and we had other priorities for the dollar versus parking lot. Parking lot still needs to be done, and that's in one of our future phases down below. Parking lot up on top, it's really kind of static. You can't expand it. You can't go towards this road without doing a tremendous amount of fill. And there would be, a lot of engineering issues and costs from a dollar standpoint. It didn't make a lot of sense.
So going back to 15, Mr. Strickland came out next door and said, we would like to do this for you if you would be willing to. We never said yes or no.
Well, that's where we talked to the county, though. Sorry.
So yeah, so you see, you're not talking to me, and you're addressing me when you as the county and not me. And that's where I think the issues are.
Okay.
Back to 15 again, it's in the newspaper that the hospital is trying to take over our building because we're not paying payments. That wasn't true. You guys weren't here, it was Bob Quest.
No, I was here, but we never.
It feels like you guys keep trying to take our property when it's not the hospital's.
So about
it was
that,
dedicated to the health department.
so about the property, other than the 4 walls you're building, what property do you
We
currently?
have to have sufficient, that lower west lot has to be dedicated for emergency preparedness and response. So those trailers, those sheds house emergency resource materials.
So is that carved out of our lease now, or is that just sort
Well,
of?
it is identified as a priority. They get a full easement of that area.
Right.
It's dedicated to them by easement, which is perpetual, so there's no way.
But an easement says you could not ever make changes on the property.
You can't expand it, but you can do whatever you want inside that easement area. It's not exclusive to the extent that power, as I understand it, the transformer for the renovated hospital is going to sit next to your transformer. So that part has to be a shared area. We don't know where it's going to be exactly.
So then the other piece that the health department is dedicated is the parking lot. That parking lot was actually built with the health department with the capacity of the actual,
I don't think that's accurate. Yeah.
that's what I found in all the documents.
So we actually have a 1971 lease from the county.
You have a lease, but I have the building documents.
We have, because the parking lot was already built, and the county actually signed a lease with TAHA, because TAHA built the parking lot, and then they signed a 50-year lease to have access for parking. But the parking lot was actually built in 71, and it was built by TAHA.
That's not what my building plans shows.
And then when they built the county health department, it was just, and we have photos, original drawings.
I have the original maps from the buildings as well.
And then our original lease also called for that parking lot.
So I think ultimately,
But at
it's
the end of the
actually
day-
up to the county commissioners, it's their property.
Yeah.
Rather than you and I going back and forth, I think it's up to the county commissioners on what they would like to keep as county property, because again, they are required to provide the health department adequate space per Colorado law.
Can I ask you, so when we first started this, we had the 2 options: replat, deed just that section to TAHA, retain what we wanted, the commissioners wanted, or do this planned community. Since there seems to be some heartburn over the planned community, and we've got the city involved now with the replatting, can we look at that option?
We could. I will tell you that is not going to solve a lot of your title problems. We were figuring out a way to solve all the problems. And again, as far as whatever tensions there have been with the health department and TAHA or with the county or whatever, that was not a part of my kind of understanding.
So I apologize.
Yeah, and so that's why when I came here, that meeting that you were at, and all of a sudden this planned community came up, I'm like, here we go again, no communication.
Well, I don't know about that. Remember, what I'm trying to do is serve the project in many ways in trying to solve some problems. And what I saw on the legal documents was just that the health department exception from all of the property that was ground leased to the hospital was just the building four walls. That's how the lease is currently written, and that's how it was platted. So if that was not supposed to be the intent, there is no parking lot right now that is associated by the legal documents to the health department building. There's just not.
And so we try to be a good neighbor and let you have preferential parking on what is our parking lot, give you as much space as you need down below that's in our lease. I mean, we've tried to be cooperative all along, so I apologize if this seems different from that.
Yeah, and I think what the goal was is, first of all, to dig in here, knowing that if we're gonna do this renovation in this hospital, and it's going to be funded with federal dollars or regulatory bank dollars, you could go either way. And they are gonna drill down, because they have to, on these title issues, and they're gonna find what we found, which is this needs some fixing. And we can go a lot of different ways to fix it. The idea was to fix it in a way that allowed for these relationships to be fleshed out, cleaned up, and actually legally documented the way that the parties intended. And certainly some of this I'm hearing for the first time, because you can't see them from the documents. And I don't have that history that some of you obviously have. But what I do know is, even if you replat it, Pam, you're gonna have these issues, because you've got these buildings, which, even though they're structurally independent, they are right together. You have no setbacks to them, you're gonna have like a party wall agreement. And if the health department wants to use the space, which is this outdoor patio space where all the tables are, that belongs to the hospital. So if you replat, you're still gonna have to deal with all those issues in some sort of an agreement, like either a party wall agreement and again, the party wall agreement would not address right of use of that patio by the health department. So there's been a lot of I would say, historical use and the way that people have just operated in the past that that we need to understand to know how best to carve this up, because that's not documented. So I think I understood the purpose of this meeting is to make sure that everyone understood that I think the intent is that we're all in this together and we're all going the same direction, and we all want a better hospital and an active, functioning, supported health department. And the COGS relationship, which I understand they park over on the hospital property because they actually bring and drive the poorer residents who are Medicaid residents of need over to the clinic and those things. So there's got to be a relationship between everybody here. That's what we're trying to do.
So what would be an issue of carving out what the health department wants carved out?
When they came back and said we want this bigger chunk, my question was, well, we really need those areas.
Are you talking about that chunk in orange, Bill?
Yes. I'm talking about the chunk that Pam has drawn up a map or got a map or somebody to send out. That would include the part, and I shouldn't say the health department, the county, because the county is the owner of it. The parking lot south of the current health department building and the back to the west up to the city street there. And I don't know if it's been indicated which one it is. I guess what would be the issue carving that out?
Well, right now, that includes some of the property that was intended and currently is under lease to the hospital. If they can find a way, or you guys can sit down now and find a way, but my understanding was that was more encompassing than currently what the hospital has maintained and improved. They also need to be able to put their utilities there. And so I think at this point it's just really figuring out how it works. And I would assume that if that's what they want to, if the county wants to own that, then they will have to actually pay for any improvements in that owned property. So, you know, if that's $100,000 to redo the parking, okay, I mean, I think we just need to drill down on what people really want to do, but, and I'll draft it however everyone agrees to it. And my goal is to try to help figure out, okay, if you want to do that, then this. So if you want to own it, you're gonna have to pay for it. And we're still gonna have to be able to have a utility easement for location.
Don't we own it now and have a lease?
Doesn't your declarations, within your declaration, doesn't it spell out a whole gamut of stuff as to how you go about putting utilities across adjacent units and everything? Wouldn't this?
Yeah, we could drop that in. That's what I'm saying. Well,
It is drafted in, isn't it, our term?
not sufficiently, because
Okay.
right now we would have to redo the drafting of those provisions that grant the health department priority easement over those areas. And it would then be an easement running from one unit to the other as far as the placement of those transformers. Running easements, utility easements usually through property. I mean, you can't go under buildings or those kinds of things, but you run it under property. A transformer sitting on top would usually be called out specifically.
Okay.
Back to my question, why would we have to pay for property we already own?
She means the upkeep of the
On the upkeep.
Any
She means
renovations
that
of
if you're
it.
gonna redo that parking lot,
Or stuff.
that was something
Or
they
you
were
can leave it
going
alone.
to do. Yeah, but she's saying that's something they were gonna do. If you keep it as your unit, then you're responsible for it. That's right.
And remember, right now, it's under lease to the hospital,
Yeah.
so to date, they've cared for it.
No,
But there'd be no requirement for the county to put $100,000 in to repair it.
No.
No, you don't have to. It'd be your choice.
Yeah, we'll put gravel.
No, but right now, the county commissioners are the ones maintaining the snow removal in our parking lot.
Just the snow removal, though, wasn't that what you told me, is it was just
And
that?
then there was
on the
confusion on
budget?
that one because our contract with Leone calls for them to remove the snow from the entire parking lot. So we would have no issue with continuing that and then Max making sure that Leone's actually
In order-
removing it. And we had no issue with having our maintenance guys actually make sure the sidewalks were clear too. We didn't realize they were stopping. And that they weren't supposed to be. So that came clear to us.
Again, what we were trying to do is give the benefit to the hospital without cost, or the health department without cost. Because right now, that's still under the lease. And if that wasn't the county's intent, and they want to redraw those, and they want to keep it gravel, great. If that's really the betterment for the campus, it would seem to me, in these projects, that when you do, one of these new combined health districts, you want the most up-to-date, you want the most appropriate parking, you want the least amount of dirt, gravel, those kinds of things that create dust. But it is a matter of dollars and cents, and if there's a territorial pull, yeah, I thought that people were really sort of in this together, and that's what we were trying to work.
Well, I think, I can't speak for the commissioners, but I think through our conversation, I think the ultimate goal is, yeah, we want to see the hospital improvement take place. Going back to lease and ownership, I think one of my concerns is that under a lease, if there's issues with properties, then the county has entered into that lease and they can probably manipulate that lease somewhat to accommodate. But once ownership's transferred, the health department, the parking lot south of the health department, all that back to the west, once ownership's transferred, then the owner is the owner, and the owner can frankly do whatever they damn well want to with that property. So that's why I'm thinking that to perhaps save some heartburn and bad tension, is to go ahead and carve that piece out. And if the hospital needs same like square footage for loans somewhere else, maybe we can get some square footage up at the north end of where it's shown on the map as COG, if they need square footage. I don't know what.
I think the appraisals will have to be redone because it was done based on the leased property, so the USDA is going to have to redo its appraisals maybe, but I don't see that as being, I think the real issue is if it's not part of their collateral, no funds can be used to that. So if you're going to carve that out, that's the beauty of a planned community. Because a planned community, even though ownership is in somebody else's name, and there are a whole bunch of things there, because we draft these again to protect everybody, so there's a lot of changes that cannot be done without unanimous approval, regardless of the number of votes that TAHA would have number of votes relating to then its overall percentage of financial responsibility. But there are a lot of things you can't change in use, you can't reconfigure the units, you can't do anything unless everybody agrees. So we put a lot of the stuff into that bucket where everyone has to agree to do these things to protect everybody. And this was not really intended to be, it was not to be one-sided in terms of control. It was intended to be one-sided in terms of pushing the cost onto TAHA because they could budget those expenses for improvements. Now, we want to back off and people think that it's actually better for the campus to cut that off where the county is going to control and therefore pay for certain of those improvements. You know, we didn't say no. I didn't get Pam's email and say, not a chance. What I said was, here are the comments, you guys need to deal with this. This is not what we thought, because we were following the leasehold. And the only thing we cut off from the leasehold was the shrine area, because you can't finance anything with religious artifacts for the government. And then the COGs, which didn't make sense because their parking lot was down there. So we said, well, they have to have all that property to get to their parking. So we cut those off. But everything else was just, you know, let's talk about it. Does it work? What do you have in the budget for X? And will the county then be stepping up for X if this goes over them? And that's where it came in. And then we just kind of stopped because the government shut down and
moving forward with control, that's another big concern for us. Maybe we come up with an idea of how many people to sit on a board. Maybe
sure.
One from the Board of Commissioners, one from TAHA, one from Council of Governments, one from the Health Department, and one from the community at large member. To when they do sit down to do these voting, these issues we're going to be moving forward with. Maybe it's time we start putting that together now.
Well, one of the things on the community at large, what we would say is that that would be a county ability. You could put for one of your seats, you could decide to do a community at large. What big banks and the federal government financing groups are going to look at is they want just ownership. You can decide who gets to sit on that, but it will be one of your seats so that they don't think that because a lot of these are unanimous decisions for any big decisions. And maybe if you guys didn't focus on that, we could go back and look at that list, because again, that requires unanimity. And if there was somebody who actually had a real vote in the community that came up and said, you know, politically I don't like this, I don't like whatever is going to happen, I want the hospital to build a new hospital across the highway or whatever, then you could grind this to a halt. So it really has to be the interested parties.
The board commissioner, or board, that we're talking about, board of directors, let's say that, you know, there was only, let's say 3, COG, Health Department, hospital. The only thing that they control, that they vote on, are issues that are related to easements or common property.
Well, for the entire campus.
Right. So the board doesn't have any control over what the hospital does within inside of it.
Just the planned community campus.
Right. And it's just, but it's just the issues that are given to the planned community. Right. So although all 3 properties are involved in the planned community, the board of directors doesn't have any saying about what COG can do within their boundaries. Right. It doesn't have, unless it affects the easement abilities of the other 2 parties. Right?
Well,
I mean, that's the only time that that this is involved.
Well,
So that's the beauty of the planned community.
I think that may be one of the reasons, I can't speak for the board again, that we would probably entertain positively carving that out, because if the TAHA owns that, at a point like this, that parking lot, and as you're alluding to, they can decide to do whatever they want to with that parking lot.
But no, see, that would fall within inside the planned community, because that is an issue that is given to the planned community to control. So we couldn't actually go and change any of the configuration of the parking lot without this part of it, without the approval from the health department and from COG, because there is an easement given to, right? Okay. So that's how it's protected.
You could approve it, but you couldn't take those priorities.
Is that drafted in?
But the
I can't diminish the rights that they're being given, right? but I could enhance the rights. Right? So that was the whole point, is by giving them that access, the preferred access, they essentially have everything they have now, but that actually puts all the improvements basically on TAHA. So that was.
And if we wanted to reconfigure that, then, I mean, right now it's, everybody gets to park. They have cross parking. If we go back to some other configuration, we could say you can only park on your unit. That might be another way to do it. You've got to feed and care for your parking on your unit, but you can't use ours. And right now, what has actually happened is people pull up and they park wherever they want to park. I mean, there's no differentiation of what a customer thinks, because when I pulled up originally, I parked in front of the health department. I walked in there and said, where am I going to find David's office? The first time that I came down when we met with the county commissioners. So there isn't any designation. And then when David told me, I'm like, oh, I parked in the north office, so I moved it. But I couldn't tell when I pulled up where I was supposed to park and what parking lot or what spaces belong to the hospital and what belong to the health department. It just wasn't. Nobody knows.
Well, and one thing too is, you know, we house a hospital employee in our health department at no cost. So then they also host, we have a big grant together where we host all the DPP, the DMSE, now stepping on classes, and now Suzanne Davis is coming over and using our meeting room for, I think it's Alzheimer's classes. So we like being good neighbors. We appreciate what the hospital does. We share very well. And so that's why there's no designation for actual client parking down there, because when there's classes, I mean, you can't park. It's completely full. You're lucky if you come back from lunch and you're right now.
That's over the entire campus.
Yeah, so.
So that's why we painted it white, so.
Well,
you know,
that was after Mr. Tucker came in.
Yeah, so all the spots are painted white for patient and visitors, to our employees, right? And also SCCOG recognizes it. And so then we only park in the orange, right? So we give all of our patients and employees, or patients and visitors preferred parking. So when somebody drives in, yeah, they're not going to know.
No, and we don't mind.
And they don't even know what the yellow and the white means. They just know that there's an empty spot.
Yeah, and we don't care because we know they're coming in for whether it's Devon or for our health department. We're welcome to that. So that's never been an issue. And we love housing Devon with us because she fits. It's a neutral site for everybody to refer into the diabetic program. So it works. And so I want to keep our relationships the way they are. It's just, I want to make sure our health department is also taken care of in the same sense.
Well, that's why the parking is, you get first priority over that part of it that we drew the easement around, and you get non-exclusive rights to park all over the other portions of campus. So to that extent, it's like these reciprocal parking arrangements, but it would be the hospital that has to take care of all of it. And if, you know, if everyone wanted to go to a different, where they want to draw, this is yours and this is ours, and you have to park here and we have to park here. Yeah, we've done that too. And a lot of that depends on what the uses are, because, you know, we were talking about whether there would be a right of first refusal, because I think at one point there was some suggestion, actually when we first met, that maybe at some point there would be a bigger, better, more modern health department at some point. But, you know, this was an attempt to try to get the campus to be reconfigured in a way that it could grow and could function for different services. What you don't want is somebody coming in and opening, I don't know, some totally inconsistent kind of use on the campus. You want to stay health use. And of course, if you use federal funds or most regulated bank funds, you can't put a marijuana distribution regardless of the Blue Cross, but it's not a health building. So you limit some uses so that they don't interfere with the intent and purpose of and the restrictions of this kind of finance.
Well, see, I think for COG, what we would need is really a clear definition of what you're talking about as far as easement and common usage. Because if this became COG's property, that doesn't mean that 5 years down the road, we may not want to build our own campus somewhere else with all of our facilities tied together and sell it. So we would need to know in advance, are there going to be restrictions as to who we can sell it to, who we can't sell it to, how does, I mean, it sounded like you were saying you were talking about if there's going to be signage that's going to be changed, do we have to go to this board to get a different sign on our building? If that's really clearly explained so my board of directors understands what we're agreeing to, then it's going to be a whole lot easier to agree to than to look at the map and say, here the county wants to give us this lower area where we wanted to build a garage potentially. It's a different decision. So I just would ask that you be really clear about what that portion is that is controlled by this board. Otherwise, the board makes no sense to me. I mean, because we just talk to the hospital and say, okay, this is where we're having parking problems, and this is how we can handle it, and that was the end of it. We didn't have to go have a meeting and do a vote and all of that kind of thing.
There's nothing that controls, so within inside your 4 walls or within inside your boundaries, you can do anything.
No,
There's nothing in here.
no, there are some restrictions, because usually what you wouldn't want is, and the reason the signage, again, this was a first draft, so this was out for what I would call sort of a market. This is what you see for these kinds of hospital campuses. And I work on Anschutz campus, I work on big ones and little ones and other USDA ones, and I do. So I've seen a lot of these, and what I was just trying to do is say, here's what makes sense to me with my experience. The only good thing about being old is you got that behind you. And it was a way to say, you wouldn't necessarily, and again, this was my first draft, and if people don't like it, fine. It was to do some sort of common usage, because these all relate. Everyone's saying, look, these buildings all relate to one another. So you might want sort of a campus sort of logo that you put on signage, or some common theme color instead of, whatever. It was intended to be more conducive so that, when you've got your emergency area, it's red, but everything else is going to be gray. Well, I mean, whatever it is where your signage is sort of the same font or the same, just to bring the campus together. If people don't care about that and they want to do whatever they want, that's fine. We didn't dictate what it had to be. What we said in the declaration is that you guys can come together and agree on that. That's all. But if people want to be able to put whatever signage they want on this kind of thing, then I don't have a problem with that. It just wouldn't be where it wasn't how I first came out of the box at it, just thinking about what made sense to me.
Well, I don't think Mr. Bolton ever got a copy of the declaration sent in.
I didn't. All I ever saw was the map, and then our attorney gave it to the board, and then they said, this is something in works and we'll know more about in the future, and this is the first future.
Yeah, and because we took it the only people that have gotten copies of this, I only sent it to Pam as a first draft, because my understanding is that when we talked about it, that's where we would start. If that was offensive, I mean, Pam could give it to whoever clients, but she was representing the county, right?
Well, actually, you sent it to me and asked me to sign it directly.
I didn't ask you to sign any declaration directly.
You sent it to me and asked me in an email to look this over and sign it. So then
No, I didn't.
Yes.
No, I didn't. You produced, that might have been the amendment, but that was, I don't think so. I didn't ask you to sign anything. We never moved on draft. There was one draft circulated, and that was it.
Yeah, so, and then.
Show me the email. I'd like to see it, because I really take offense at that, because I would not have done that. That's
Then I
not,
forwarded it to Pam.
that's not how I work, and that's just
And maybe you
not
sent
the way
it
it was.
to, maybe you meant to send it to her, not me.
No, I'll pull it up right now, because I have all my emails on this.
Well, so let me, I guess, recap where we are. So we had, in good faith, really tried to develop a map to give everybody what they had, if not, and then some, and have the hospital have the burden. for maintaining the majority of the campus. We thought that was at least reasonable, if not generous. So now we're at a point, for the last probably year, we've assumed that we needed to have title to this campus to get our financing in place for our project. In the last, I guess, 2 months probably, we've learned that we're not under that requirement anymore. It would still be beneficial for us to go the USDA route, but we have some other private financing available to us that doesn't need title to the property. So now we're sort of in the position, do we want to kind of keep moving this direction, try to keep everybody whole and take title to what's left of the campus, or we just leave our lease in place for the 85 years we've got left on it and continue to operate as is. So that's kind of where we are. So
Can I just say, to me, and I haven't seen these documents either, but I am TAHA. And it just sounds like we haven't communicated very well. And it's kind of like gone to the end game, and we've not gotten everybody's input.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Carolyn. And that's how the county feels.
Well,
The county feels like the communication broke down after that first meeting. We really haven't had much dialogue, other than the attorney and attorney. And I think if that letter went to Kim, and I believe it did, because I think she called me on it and asked me what we should do, and I said, don't sign anything. So maybe it was just sent wrong or what, but we all realize that this hospital is going to be for the better of our community. We're all behind it. It's just a matter of getting to that next level with the communication and protecting all entities involved. Mr. Boland's got a board he has to answer to as well, and so does Kim. And so when they come to before their particular boards and they don't have answers and they got a bunch of questions coming at them, it's difficult for them to respond. Sisto is our lawyer for Council of Governments. He's here in the room now, and he's never seen any of it either, right, Sisto? You haven't seen any of this declaration, or?
I have, no, who haven't?
Okay, you got it.
But he sent me some documents and I sent them over.
Okay.
Hey, my ethics are I send it to lawyers. I don't send it to clients directly. And Pam knows that's not ethical, and I don't function that way.
Yeah, maybe it was.
I don't tell anybody's client to do anything. That comes from their own lawyers.
But moving forward, we have to figure out how to get this going and back together, back on track. And any of the concerns that we have, I guess our attorneys can disclose that with Ms. Rader and moving forward. Now the hospital, I mean the church is pretty much out of it. You're pulling the plug on that for the Unit 5, what's it called?
Well, so it's still in so is all that currently in our lease, Liz?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, the land surrounding it?
Yeah,
All
so
land surrounding this right
so
now.
they're in it to the same extent that everybody else is their property is in our lease.
But we were excluding them from the planned community and just basically chopping it off and saying shrine and leaked property to the south.
The reason why I ask is because you make comments that the USDA grants can't encompass the church or
Right, so it has to come out
But you
through
just
some
mentioned
process.
you might go another
Right.
way, another funding
In which case,
source.
we just
Which would it bring it back in?
listen.
Would it bring the
No,
church
so
property back into
the shrine property is its own property. It's not, that is accepted from our lease, right, the shrine itself.
Accepted within.
But it's in the middle of our property. But then it's accepted, it's kind of like that country in South Africa. I can't think of the name of it now. But anyways,
So is there a way for us to sort of salvage this and go back and have a big blow up of the map and everybody talks about what's what, or do we just need to stay with our lease? And forget we ever started this discussion.
And we don't have the other two commissioners here who are also newer to this. As remember,
Right.
Denise is the only one that's been up from the beginning. But I think where we're at is that we sent those comments to Lou. I think we'd like to see what the responses are back to that to see if we can keep going forward with that. I think, especially to the carving out of the health department. I think that's a big piece of it.
From the city standpoint, sorry, she said it's messed up. We appreciate it if you, whether it's a planned unit or whatever you guys decide on, it'd be nice to have plats with track 1, 2, 3, and 4 rather than it's platted across an old subdivision.
Yeah.
All the roads vacated, and so we'd love to have it.
Definitely like the shrine included in that subdivision plat, have all of it platted at once. They can be excluded from your association, but
Be
not
part of the
the
plat.
subdivision plat.
Lou, what is in the plan, community document as it relates to the health department as far as property and, is it just the four walls of their building plus easements?
Yeah, I just followed what I followed, and I just looked up the distributions. So my understanding, and again, we didn't even go around, I don't know who's here representing who or who most of you are. But when I met the first time, I met with Kim, she represents the county. I later learned about CSTO, I sent him the documents, and Kim, I forwarded them to you also in draft form, and I don't know who your lawyer is. But I copied him. I mean, do you have a separate lawyer from the county, or is it the same?
We've also asked CSTO to help us out if need be.
Okay, that's the first I heard about that, but
But
anyway.
yes, so I sent Pam that email that I said that you had sent me with the draft.
I see it right here, and she was copied on it.
Yeah.
And it was a draft. And I said further, we will likely add the health department as one of the signers on these documents in order to confirm that its ownership of the building is included as part of its unit. I know that the government shutdown is delaying the final closing dates, but we were hopeful we would begin to finalize aspects in order to close as soon as possible. They didn't ask for signing, it was just a draft, it was the same day as.
So let's just stop, let's stop here and let's take a step back and let's get everybody's input. Let the hospital decide whether they're gonna go forward with the USDA or some other form of financing and leave the lease intact. I mean, it just seems like everybody's got their nose out of joint here, and we just need to come together. This is a community, not the hospital, not the health department, not COG. It is a community that we're talking about. And we've all got our little walls built around us, and let's stop it.
We never intended for that.
No, I know that, and I know the hospital didn't either.
No, the hospital
So
never.
let's just take a step back.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, really, our financing has been, the need for it is a little bit, but we need to get the hospital built.
Yes, we do. Our community needs it.
And my understanding when we got the approvals, was that that was the goal of the county. And, you know.
It is the goal of the county, but as Pam said, if we can get a response to her bullets that she sent.
Well, and there are a lot of business points in there. Most of them are business points. There aren't a lot of, that's what the clients have to decide, what they're willing to live with, or they just want to live on the lease and go forward with a different financing and just keep it where it is.
Has one and then,
I think he'll pass the insurance.
oh,
We
okay.
will most of us have that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I got one more from you. I got a bunch of these.
So did we get a response on
These
that?
are what,
No, that's what she's saying, is that she's gotta work with their clients to determine what the response is.
Thank you.
Well, again, from COG's perspective, I don't think initial look, we had any problems with the map, especially once we determined that we weren't chopping off those last parking lot pieces that we have, because I couldn't see it very well in that red. Our issue was just, I mean, and this is my issue, because I haven't really gone to the board, but Cecil's mentioned that when we brought it was, I want a clear understanding of what that planned community board had jurisdiction over. And so if we're talking about easement and common usage, I just need a definition of what's included in that, what's not included in that. And then I don't think my board is going to have a problem with it if they just understand what we would be going into. I think our issues would probably be more with the county as far as if you deed this over to us, you know, now we're going to have to maintain it, I mean, or plow it or that kind of stuff. So it'd be much more of an issue with just getting the county and stuff.
So the county currently has the lease or owns the land and then building sits on it? Is that right?
I think it was given to us for probably $1, $10, I don't know what, back in the day, that it's county, we sit on county land, it's a county-owned building, but we have exclusive use of it as long as we exist. Is that basically it, Susan?
So it's
So as
not
long
we
as
own the building,
you
too.
own everything.
Titles and that.
Okay, we thought.
Yeah, whatever relationship.
We built the
We
building.
can draft this definitely to whatever relationship that you guys
Well, I
want
mean,
to.
we wouldn't be opposed to talking to the county about taking ownership of it. In fact, there might be funding that we may go after for a garage down that lower lot at some point, where it would be to our advantage to own the property instead of having the county own it.
Yeah, so-
And we don't.
So in that draft, does it say how the property can be transferred or not?
You can transfer it, but there are the restrictions, but that's something that we're gonna need to discuss too, is because I don't think the county can give it to COG at this point. I think we'd have to,
It'd be the pass-through if
Keep
you
it,
wanted to go
and
for
they-
grants or anything like that.
they stay there, so they may not be, and I think that when we were doing this, we thought that you guys owned the building, which is why COG was a party to all of this, but if we own the building also, then it's kind of just like the health department.
That's
We would
my
own both of those
understanding.
units
That
and
you
have
own
that.
it all, but we have, I mean, you probably think we own it because we're the ones who refurbished it and rebuilt it and all of that, but my understanding is it's still county property.
So it may look more like the health department piece looks than we initially thought, but that's what we're doing.
But again, that's not what title shows now.
Or Lou, do we want to start going
So
through
you
these
need
both?
to know that that's not how
Title
title
shows.
shows.
What is the title show?
We'll talk, I'll talk to you offline. It's a mess, man, it's a mess.
So do we want to go through these bullets and figure out what's a deal breaker and what isn't? Because this is probably a deal breaker for us.
Yeah, let's go forward.
Lou, do you want to facilitate that?
Well, okay, I have Pam's email, and again, this is the same one John and Dave, I forwarded to you guys and said you need to take a look at that. So the division of Unit 1, the way the map currently divides is not giving enough property for those. Talked about that issue, so let's go on to the next bullet for that. The name is an issue for many and suggest a change to Los Angeles County Health Campus. That's, what do you call your hospital? So, again, that's a business point, you can,
But this is just for the planned community title.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know that
So-
anybody really cares what.
So, again, that's where the business, whatever you guys want to call it out there. Commissioners would like language added that would allow them the right of first refusal of any sale of property being transferred to TAHA. And the proceeds would be given to the county. That's probably a non-starter because that would, that's a right of refusal that banks won't accept when they finance.
Yeah.
They just won't, because when they foreclose on that property, it's something that the hospital isn't working. So that's usually a non-starter for financing purposes. Which is why leaseholds are not financed a lot by some of these programs. And again, you get the programs because you get less interest rate and longer terms, you can do more with your dollars.
Does this document also give us first purchase option if the health department or COG?
No, that would be totally outside of that. We did talk about
And this
that
isn't,
internally, but
this
that's
isn't the
not.
right of purchase.
Right.
It's a right of, it's right of, in the way that's written. It would allow the county to say, no, you can't sell.
Right.
And it'd be like that. And then two, we did all these improvements and then we did sell it because we're gonna go build another hospital. We need to be able to take the proceeds from that sale.
Right.
But that's not what the first part is.
No, the
Right
second
of first
part, the
refusal-
second part.
Yeah, that was the second part. Right of first refusal was, we want the right to purchase it back. Not that you can't sell it. So that,
Because we wanted that same right for the COG building, as well as we wanted that right for the health department. So if either one of those folks decided they wanted to go open up somewhere else, we would like to have the first option to buy.
So,
I think, so reciprocal, I don't think we have an issue with reciprocity on that one.
so here's where these financing sources would allow, outside of the declaration, if they want to do a right of first offer to each other that is accepted or rejected, like if they're going to sell because they want to build a whole new campus somewhere else, then they come to the county and say, here's the value we're going to sell this for if you want it.
Or
And the same would go the other.
Or being able to say, we have an offer, let's say the health department gets an offer for $1 million. We have the ability to match that, and then we would get purchased.
Sold.
Right, you know what
I
I'm saying?
think Matt Loudon did that to you guys, asking for $1 million, right? He talked about that?
He wanted two.
He wanted $2 million?
Two plus. Right?
But usually, David, you don't want right of first refusal, you want to do right of first offer, and that would go the same
Okay.
way to every other, I mean, it's sort of.
So we have no issue with that going back and forth, I mean, reciprocity.
But you're saying it can't be in the declaration, it has to be a separate agreement?
Yep, and it's just really, it's a right of first offer, it's not binding if nobody wants to do it, they don't have to. But the second part of that, proceeds of the sale would be given to the county with load financing. You'll not get money from anybody with that. So the first part of that, a separate agreement with reciprocal. If we're gonna sell, we come to you first. If you're gonna sell, you come to us first. If we can't reach an agreement, then you can sell it to any third party who wants it.
Which bullets next?
Under
Under
section 213.
all units except for those retained by the county, 1 and 2 will be excluded from the requirement for prior written consent. I think on consent, again, we're gonna whittle this down because under the declaration, the biggest, in fact, the only general common element was the road. So if that goes away because we can dedicate it, there shouldn't be anything that's common in this that other people are gonna have to pay for unless we're gonna be chopping up the parking lot for different units and then everyone gets to pay for their own parking and they park in their own parking, period. And so if we wanna revisit, consent, it usually, remember, I don't know how much you focused on the fact that there are a lot of unanimous consent requirements that are intended to protect the integrity of this campus for everybody. But
So
we'll
we
go
just-
back and look at that. Once you take out this general common element, you really have very little. And you can decide if you want to put, like, if you want to have a little part of this tract, which is an easement for the big sign for the Los Angeles County Health Campus. If you want to do that, we can do that, those kinds of things. But otherwise, you're really not going to have a lot of general common elements here unless, again, we don't dedicate the road.
Well, in this section, that 2.13 was for combination subdivision of your own unit. And so under that section, the concern with the county was they had to ask for other owners to approve, but the other unit owners didn't have to. So they weren't having an issue with the other unit owners.
Yeah, we can
just
make it,
reciprocal.
that, we can make it common and,
Maybe we can revise that with where everybody's happy.
there's gonna be a lot of revisions of this thing at this point, just because we're taking out the road. I mean, that's gonna be a big change in this, and, so we can expect, but we have to get on the same page with the city. Next bullet, commissioners are concerned with allowing each unit to have a voting right. So we talked about that.
So what do you think on the voting, should it just, you can do it, it's where it's the board of commission, the three parties, so in essence, the county commissioners have 2 votes, because they have one through COG, through their nominee, and through the health department, their nominee, and then our nominee, and that's just about it.
And so there aren't any common elements we're gonna maintain at this point. I hate for us to be responsible for the maintenance of the entire campus and be 1 vote out of 5,
No, that's right.
or 1 out of 3.
That's right. If we don't have, and again, votes comes along with responsibility. The more votes you get, the more you pay. And that was why we set it up that way. If we're gonna do this differently and everyone pays for their own chunk, then again, we don't need to worry about a lot of that. We'll have to just figure out what the agreement is and then go back and redraft this to match that. So, and remember, votes, there's only, we'll be taking down the vote issues. That my concern going into this is that eventually the city would come to us and say that we have to dedicate that roadway, we have to bring it up to speed, we have to have proper drainage, which would be very expensive on that. and we want, curb and gutter. Now, and I don't know if you're the city or what you're. Okay, good. But I have to tell you, the people at the city have been great, because when they came to us and they said.
This is Georgiana.
Okay, sorry. Oh, you're Georgie. Well, nobody went around and made introductions, so I talked to you and very happy with.
So do we want to
This
clarify,
is-
do we want to just clarify what it is that is going to be subject to the board of directors, and then we just come back at our next meeting and then decide on the board of directors? Let's figure out first, so we can figure out whether or not, doesn't matter. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to put the horse in front of the cart.
Yeah. So going to the second
Question
page,
then.
or, the right of entry, I think it was about the common area, so we'll clarify that one. It's about what the planned community part is. It's not, this is not designed, it was not intended to give the hospital the right to enter the health department or the right to enter COG, vice versa. That's not its intent at all. We'll clarify that.
Yeah, remember the units are, other than the health department building, the units are chunks of land, so the idea was there, if you needed to go over somebody's land, this is for everyone else's benefit, not TAHA's, because it has direct,
We'll let
the
the,
utilities.
I would suggest that we let the attorneys discuss the indemnification parts. Maybe they can,
Did you understand what I was saying there, Ruth?
yeah, you can.
Yeah, everybody's a quasi-governmental entity, and so we can modify that to the extent permitted. It's just really to say, if somebody gets hurt on another piece of the project property, that somebody's coming to the health department and they trip on some of the parking lot, but it's not somebody else's fault, it's not covered by insurance. It's like you're holding each other harmless from what's supposed to be happening on your own unit. But yeah, we can tweak a lot of that.
Commissioners are not comfortable being responsible for the tunnel. I really don't know how to work that one.
Now, I can tell you on that one. I can tell you on that one. That one is not. It's the only thing that's connected to is the cost building.
Yeah.
There's no other
It
connection.
just dead ends.
So we can leave it there, or it can be taken out.
It's actually not a tunnel anymore, it's a cave.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's.
But there's no way to access it other than through that building.
Right, and you can see where it ends, because, I mean, historically, it went to the old hospital, so we don't know why they didn't fill it in when they filled in the other half of it, but it's been part of that, so it's, right now it's part of the CCOG lease, just because that's where it starts. I don't know what to do on that one, guys. Yeah, definitely 603. I think we need to be approved for all signs.
And that just makes sense, you know, the aesthetics are gonna be needed. We don't wanna look like a,
So you weren't thinking about putting a big green neon?
yeah, no neons and.
Forget about it.
Well, no, but I mean, we're also more than health. I mean, we're
Yeah.
early learning center, we do housing, we do, I mean, what you're defining as health is a very small part of what we do. So to take that one small part and restrict everything else as far as our organization is concerned doesn't make sense either. So I mean, it's just gotta make sense. And that's where, in order to even have that conversation with my board, I've got to have a real clear understanding of what are you talking about as far as this common usage.
You know, one of the things that we've done before is we've put in a provision that says that the parties, you know, the board will agree on signage requirements. Doesn't matter what they are.
And
It
I
doesn't
just
have
use
to
that
be-
as an example, because we're just gonna COG in front of a board, I'm building, I mean, my board can go for anything other than that too, but it's just this idea of what does it mean, and what does that restriction mean?
We did it where it shall not be unused.
Well, I think.
Because the
we're-
health department could say, no, we don't think you're sign either because we think it's gaudy.
Well, and it's not this sign. I
No.
think where the issue comes up, because it says no signs, billboards, poster boards, or advertising structure of any client sign. They're worried about all the signs that they have to post for their clinics or when they put their stuff out. That's where,
That's not a sign, is it?
well, poster board.
Posters, billboards.
So
Maybe
that's
it
the
should be-
problem.
Maybe it should be
So
permanent
if we
signage.
could,
Maybe,
yes,
maybe
if we
clarify
could
Permanent
clarify
external
that,
signage.
that would clarify the issue.
Because we have to go
External.
through
Building
big
signage.
exercises that we have to put signage out to direct people. And of course, they get picked up after we're done, or through clinics or whatever, but it's not
Maybe we
permanent.
can
So we have permanent built into the building
So,
that we could never do.
yeah,
Okay, so
we've looked at actually removing our building signage because we can't fix it. You know, but we know that if we took it off, we'll have huge holes. So, you know, we've talked about how to go about doing that. We just haven't been able to commit to spending the money.
Yeah, we were just worried about, non-permanent signage that we
Yeah,
would be able to put out there with that. That was our issue.
So we'll modify that.
Yeah, we can modify it. Yeah,
To
yeah,
just be
this is
about
just
the big permanent signage is what I think, trying to make sure the campus.
We'll just put, building signage.
But that also means that if we change our signage, we're gonna have to come back to you and say, hey, this is what we're gonna be changing our signage to. This, you know. So, I mean,
And actually, we
it
could-
inhibits the hospital just.
And I think as far as that kind of signage, nobody had an issue, it was just that everyday signage, they didn't have to
That
have
was
permission.
What we can do is we can actually take that out and just say that the board will adopt a signage plan. That's it. And then nobody has to get consent, and they can change it with a vote of the board.
For section 604,
Yeah, I'll look at that, that's not
because
problem.
we have hazardous, what would be
Medical
defined
waste.
as hazardous. So we'll address that one. Oh, the easements on the park.
Yeah.
The patio, I don't think patio needs the need.
Yeah, no, they need a.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if
And
the
if we ever
hospital
changed it,
changes,
we would always make sure that they had a secondary. Yes, we wouldn't have an issue with that. Just because it's a fire safety. And it's next door.
but at some point you give them access over that, portion, but if you reconfigure that, they'll have to build their own egress, because that's so steep.
No, what we're saying is that if we did any changes, we would make sure they always had two forms of egress. We wouldn't take away their doorway right there.
How do they get out in that doorway? Where are they?
They have to go into the hospital. Oh, no, they go across the parking lot, or across the patio to the exit.
Okay, so
Because we had
that,
talked about one of our original design plans, was we were putting a sidewalk all the way, or a walkway, all the way down the side of the health department building, so that you have an easement, because we were gonna have to do the front,
Right, and then.
right? And so then that was gonna provide yet another way of easement access. Because right now, if you guys go out your back door, you got 2 ways to go.
Right, we have the patio or the hospital.
Right. But and we also have probably some code requirements that we're gonna have to be able to go out that way too. So we wouldn't have an issue with making sure.
we'll have to figure it out. And again, what you don't want is, who has to build the stairs to get down? Let's say if they had to go down.
Okay. And then as far as Article 8 of insurance,
So I sent that in a separate email.
so you guys got that.
I think so.
So really, we're just back to ownership versus access.
So the big thing is, that I guess one of the things you could talk about here is if you want to draw that even differently, then you're gonna have to have, from what I'm hearing about, having classes that use more parking than is allocable to the health department. I mean, that's been the shared access relationship anyway. And, so that's really kind of a business decision. Whatever you think is the right way to do that, it's just ownership usually comes along with the obligation to pay for any striping, repaving, anything. And if you want to keep that lower level all gravel and don't want it paved, then, you know, then that would be what you would do with the hospital. If they couldn't, because unless it's part of the collateral for the bank, you can't use loan funds on properties that are not owned by TAHA. So if they want the parking lot and they want those other improvements done at the cost of the hospital, then it stays the way the lease is structured with easement rights for parking, and that basically it's drafted the way I understand it's used now. They get priority here, but they get to park other places and classes and everything else. Similarly at the hospital, if somebody like me comes in and doesn't know the difference between yellow and white, and I park in the health department because it wasn't signed, and goes over to the hospital, that nobody's going to get in trouble for that either, because they're just cross parking. But that's what the business decision has to be. And then I'll draft it however the parties agree.
And we'll have to put that before the other two commissioners as well, bring them up to speed. That's the bad part about term limits, is you get new guys coming in or new gals every 2 years. So
Yeah.
I think Phil can get
So
that
what we
information.
proposed, what we were proposing, and we need to make sure the document reflects that, was giving them permanent access and easement and preferential to that parking and to that storage area that they had requested. And that would remain theirs for perpetuity, regardless of whether we sold the property. Because if we sold the property, they inherit that restriction on the property. So that was where we were at. Was trying to give them all the access and use of the property,
All the benefits and no cost.
but not the cost. And if it's not drafted to reflect that, we can definitely work on the wording. So that's what our proposal is.
Well, there's a couple of issues in here, the tunnel, that I'll have to take to the board, since not all the commissioners are here. But I think we made progress on a lot of the issues, so I think I can take those to the board and get back to you with what their position is on those issues.
And you know, again, I think this was the first shot of the bow. So the other thing I think we have here, like it doesn't match what I think you got from me, and was right now we have this as the COG Unit 2, and I think what we have identified as that was going to go to COGS, but I think what you said is that's going to the county, and then you'll deal with the lease back to COGS.
Yes, because I think Cecia's going to look into the ownership, and then you said you have some information on the ownership, so we need to figure out.
Well, we ran title on this, and I know that there are a number of deeds back and forth, and there's enough there to query who owns what, frankly, and what interest COG remains. And we, you know, again, we can clean all this up with the planned community where everyone says whatever interest, and this is not in there now, because again, we hadn't run any title when we took this first draft out. And what came back is that this Unit 6 building, the COGS building, was transferred to TAHA, and that was financed, but it was signed by COGS and not by the county, and there was a question about whether the county owns an interest. So there's a lot of confusion, I think, over the years about if COGS is independent or is it the county? Same with the health department. Is the health department independent as a board, as an entity, assigning? So we need to get everyone in to say, whatever, you know, plan, whatever we have, and certainly this will be true on the plat, if we're gonna give the road to the city, everyone who is in that chain of title should sign that, so they can say, look, whatever interest I have, I don't want to be caught up in this chain anymore. Let's just clean it up so everybody grants this plat. And the city, correct me, George, if I'm misquoting you on this, but they said, you guys figure out the way you want to configure it and we'll work with you. And then we'll give you a zoning that was community service, or neighborhood services, which was a really good solution for this because it didn't have hospital in that list, but they were going to add that in the list. So that legislation is still formulating, is that right? Pardon?
Is it going to be hospital or healthcare services?
In the code?
Or is it going to be both?
I believe it would be healthcare and, well, hospitals and healthcare. There's
An emergency use.
Well, because we, you know, so if we want to build another clinic, for example. Right? Oh, no, just for hospitals.
No, well, you want to make sure MOBs are included. So you've got, you know, medical serving buildings, and I think you said residential was in there, so they could get something built where eventually you had residents in, so that you could, you know, there have been a lot of programs that talk about putting medical students, if they come to a rural hospital for a certain number of years, just to get good in town. You know, there were a bunch of things.
I'll look at that. I don't have to town on the residents.
I think you said it did encompass the ability to put residential in there. Because another thing that we're seeing a lot of is on some of these is that if you have any, like the VA was really interested in being able to house veterans who needed housing and medical care. So some of those will really try to get that into these communities so that it's something we could include and not downzone it as currently. So anyway, we can talk about that. So I know it's still formulating. But those were things I think we wanted to pass and pass.
So next steps?
I will meet with the board, we meet next Tuesday, and then you'll fix some of the stuff that we agreed on today, the drafting pieces, and then we can get you our position on those three other issues.
I probably won't turn the document until we know these pieces. Because, I mean, frankly, what I said to these guys, if they have another financing alternative, we'll live on the lease. We don't spend any more time or money.
So what are the other three?
So the
Unit 1.
Unit 1.
And that's a deal breaker for us. The tunnel's a deal breaker for us. Is there a third?
Yes, the proceeds of the sale. And I have to take this to the board because it was other commissioners that weighed in on that, so I have to let them know where that's at.
We can't live with any of those.
We won't get financing. Again, you have a financeable lease because it's over 50 years. So, you know, one option is just to leave it as is, replat it in terms of the whole, and dedicate the road on a replat, but not follow the planned community, not live with the planned community, just replat it so and then you want deeds back and forth to clean up the title because it needs to be done.
The title ownership clarified regardless.
So John, I just want to clarify, when you say on the redrawing of the health department, the way that it's drawn here, is there any other configuration that you're looking at, or just the way that you guys have it initially drawn, or?
Well, so our document intends to keep them whole the way they are now, both with parking and with the space they use kind of behind and beside their building.
So, so what you're saying is if the commissioners are asking for you to draw it any way different than the way you have right here.
Right, so this is a kind of a picture of either what is in the document or what would be agreeable to, because that's what they, and probably more than they use now.
Okay. Okay, I just need to clarify that for when we're
So, just looking at this lower lot right here, where it's cut off, we actually have a pad
We can move
prepped for a big EPR trailer coming in for the floods for Walsenburg. So that's actually what that pad is prepped for.
We can move that line over.
So this, you can have this piece this way out.
Yeah, so that for sure.
So that, and so I understand, so is that, do you have an agreement with the county to utilize that space, or is that in our lease? Does anybody know?
It's not in your lease and it's nowhere. I mean, those have been operational things that you just accommodated, so
Right.
technically they could probably be deemed sort of
Right.
waivers, but those are not enforceable if you wanted to enforce your lease.
So I know the two previous directors before me went to the commissioners in, I think it was 2000, with the bioterrorism actual rule from Colorado, the Colorado board rules came into play where it was required for public health departments to house BT emergency preparedness materials, and that's where we acquired that lower piece to start. That's what the satellites for, that's what the trailers are for, that's what all that.
If they gave them a lease though, obviously we're not aware of this lease, but our lease actually encompasses that area. So if the county commissioners at that time gave them, the health department expanded their lease, they actually infringed upon our lease, without getting a waiver from us. So, hasn't had an issue with it.
Yeah, we don't have an issue.
We didn't realize
It's
it
all in
was
the
actually
background.
a lease. We just thought that it was just, be good neighbors.
Anything else? We have a good starting point again, moving forward with these issues, and
What are our timelines?
Well, I guess a lot of this depends on, you know, we probably would have scrapped this and gone to lease financing if we were not held up by the asbestos. So, I mean, at some point, what's gonna drive it is the need.
How long do we have, David? 4 weeks at the outside?
I mean, I'm hoping to have a USDA. Right now, this is really probably gonna hold us up. We'll get you in good fund USDA. So when you meet with them next Tuesday, is it gonna be an open session or is it gonna be an executive session?
It'll be executive to discuss these issues because it'll be under negotiation.
Do you need,
No, because Louisville, Kim and I were here. I was going to explain to them what these 3 issues are what we presented as a board. We're going to explain the response since they weren't here. But
I'm saying it would be helpful if John is here, so if they come back
if you have questions, sure.
and be able to say, okay.
Yeah.
I'll be curious, so if they have, you know, if they come back and they say, hey, we want to say, would you guys be okay with this?
Yeah.
Just try to do
Go. Gotcha.